Brew Strong is brought to you by morebeer.com, where a man can brew like a man.
Time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think. Jamil Zainashev and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters.
Greetings, Cretans.
Back for another episode of John Funnyman Palmer. And
I'm the rock of this show.
yeah, right. Okay. All right. We're having a good time here in the studio today.
We really are, yeah.
You're trying a bunch of beers from New Zealand.
Yep. This one doesn't have the fruitiness of some of the hops that I've tasted
from most beers from New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
Harrington's Classy Red. This is an American Pale Ale. Brewers of fine beers and ales since 1991. Served chilled.
Yeah.
No, I'd serve it hot.
It's tasty. Yeah.
How do you like Studio B, Palmer?
I like it a lot. It's bright and airy. Doesn't smell like dogs.
Yet.
It smells like ass.
Yeah.
That's what
it's
entire rat pad smells like.
It suits you. You look good in here, Palmer.
Well,
we designed the light right for you.
Yeah, your pale, pasty complexion
really brightens up in here.
Yeah. Really seems almost natural instead of death-like.
Put an oyster in a bright room and it looks like an oyster in a dark room. Yeah.
That's right.
Oh my gosh! Well, I don't want to keep our guests waiting. And today is full of great guests. We actually earlier did a couple of shows, 2.5 hours with Dr. Charles Bamforth.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. And we've got another special guest lined up today, AJ DeLange. AJ, how you doing today?
Just Andy. How are you guys?
We're great.
All right. Well,
aren't you tired?
No, not too much.
No, because you've been taking on fuel.
Yep.
Right.
Great to have you on the show.
Hey, great to be on. Thanks.
Well, and AJ, we were talking, before the show started, we were talking about your background and your bio, and what declassified information can you tell us about your
career,
your career and your education and what have you?
Well, okay. I was an electrical engineer for many years and retired just a little over a year ago. And man, is this great! I can spend full time on thinking about making, drinking, analyzing beer, and going on radio shows. I worked around the Beltway here in the Northern Virginia area for 40-some years, 45 years. Working mostly for the intelligence community. That's about all I can say. And specializing in the scientific end of it. Not
you didn't kill people with a ballpoint pen.
Well, he can't talk about it, even if he did.
Just help raise the intelligence of the community.
It was the purely the technical side, the electrical engineering side, communications, signals analysis, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, and
retirement's better.
Yeah. Don't I know it?
You do, Jamil.
Right.
I try not to talk about it among people that are, still in the thick of it.
Right.
But you'll get there. You'll get there.
They just get annoyed.
Exactly.
And in the brewing community, not just the homebrew community, but in the professional brewing community. For example, Dr. Bamforth, you recently submitted a paper that he mentioned to us while he was here. He was
very patient.
Yeah, a lot of people know about you and your ability to really get ultra geeky about this stuff.
Well, somebody has to do it.
Somebody's got to dig in, huh?
And you guys don't do too badly either.
That's why I got Palmer here, so that helps. I drink beer, look pretty. That's pretty much my role here in the studio.
Well, you got the beer part down.
Sounds pretty through the headphones.
All right. Well, and today, AJ, you helped us with the BJCP color guide. I don't know if anybody has seen that. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have. There are BJCP judges out there, and every BJCP judge was supposed to get one of those color guides. And the challenge was, there have been color guides out before put on like an acetate where you could. There was light going through this thing instead of just reflected light to represent the color, and that was a real challenge. And when the idea came up, how do we make a really cheap, color guide that we can send out to everybody that's still accurate and useful? Well, first person I turned to was AJ, and I said, "Hey, you got to help us out because you know a lot about beer color and analyzing color and all this." And we had AJ, we had a good friend of mine, Chad Stevens from down in San Diego. He helped with the printing, and Joe Formanek was on the group. But that convinced me right there that you are amazing in your ability to analyze data and think about this aspect of beer and many other aspects as well. But that's why I wanted to get you on with us on Brew Strong. So. Well, I keep ranting along here. The beer is starting to catch up with me.
Well,
I wanted to talk about beer color, and I really want to understand, where it comes from. How it's
why
determined.
Can't we measure it?
Why can't you or can you measure it? And just that whole project brought more questions to me than answers, I think. So that's why you're here, and let me start off with the simple thing, and I bet you it's not that easy to answer. What is beer color, and why do we worry about it, AJ?
Well, the easy part, I think, is why we worry about it, and Charlie alluded to it in the first hour. So I wrote down his quote: "You drink with your eyes." So, as with any other food, I think the appearance of beer is a very large part of the experience. If you were given a deep amber Kolsch, told it was a Kolsch, the guy put it in front of you on the bar, you'd say, "Well, this isn't a Kolsch." Charlie talked about if you were given an extremely turbid lager when you weren't expecting it, that would be disquieting. Blue mashed potatoes, very pale Guinness, just doesn't seem right. And I think another part of it is and I think this came out in the early part of your show, brand recognition. A lot of people that are the antithesis of the way we approach beer want exactly the same thing every time. And he told the story of a beer where they cleaned up the turbidity and the consumers didn't like it. And there's a famous story about Rolling Rock that the buyer cleaned up the DMS and the sales dropped in half. I think it'd be very much the same if Bud Light came out even one SRM unit darker. Well, I imagine we're going to be talking about SRM units pretty extensively here. Even one unit darker, I think the consumers would say that's not right.
Mm-hmm. Something's wrong with this beer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The beer color guidelines all have a band of colors, and I think we all expect that a sample of beer in that particular style is going to be within that particular color band, and if it isn't, we knock off points as judges.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what was the first part of the question? Where does the color come from?
Or
what is the color? What is color?
Yeah, what is color?
What is color?
Well, maybe more about how we specify beer color. I mean, we talk about it. Most people will talk about it as, it looks like kind of straw, or it looks like amber, or it looks it's black or brown. Common terms for color, but there's a different way of measuring color, right?
Absolutely. And the question you guys didn't ask me is how I got interested in this. And part of the reason there is because I'm colorblind. So descriptions like pale amber with a hint of red really kind of fall short on me. So, and by the way, I just commented that John Dalton, who was probably the guy that kicked off color science, was interested in it for the same reason. So in Europe, they call colorblind people Daltonians. But people with normal vision and even people with abnormal vision perceive color as stimulus to 3 different kinds of receptors in the eye. We all have rods and cones, and the rods are require more light to activate, but they come in 3 subtypes responsive to red, green, and blue light, whereas the cones are used for vision in the shadows. You see sort of a gray there. You can't perceive color if it's too dim. So what color really is, as we perceive it, is the relative stimulus of these 3 types of sensors. And what we see when we look at a beer glass, we hold it up to light. I mean, it's ridiculous to talk about trying to perceive beer color by reflected light. So by transmitted light, what hits each of those 3 receptors depends on how the light that you're using to look at the beer with is distributed. If it's an old tungsten light bulb, it's going to put out a heck of a lot more red light than green light and blue light. If you're holding it against the northern sky, it's going to be a lot more blue than red, and so on. Your eye tends to compensate for that to some extent, but it's still a factor. And then the other part of the equation, of course, is how much of each kind of light, each wavelength of light, the beer absorbs as the light passes through it. And that depends on the concentration of light-absorbing materials within the beer and the length of the path through which the light has to pass. So that a 200 milliliter Kolschstange of Kolsch looks pale yellow, but if you fill it into a Krugmass, which my wife does, despite my attempts to try to get her to use the correct glass, she'll carry it into the room, and I said, "What's that?" Because the Kolsch is her favorite. It doesn't look like Kolsch; it looks much darker. Well, that's because it's a much thicker path in that Krugmass. So then there are other more subtle effects, like, believe it or not, how close to your eye you hold it, well, that's a nuance that I don't think we need to get into.
Well, and how much you've had to drink, right? So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, why don't we do this? Why don't we take a short break, and when we come back, why don't you think about how color is specified, what units we use to measure, and
can do.
Okay, we'll be back right after this.
Brew smart. Brew strong. This is Brew Strong.
This holiday season is one of gratitude, giving, and winning. More Beer says thank you to all their wonderful customers with deals from Thanksgiving through New Year's, in addition to low prices, free shipping, and the More Beer deal of the day every day. And one lucky customer is going to win Regan's Big Fat Package, the very first More Beer pressurizable conical fermenter. Rolling out just in time for the holidays, it's their brand new redesigned stainless conical line with a new threadless racking port, new stand stand options, and a new pressurizable lid. They're giving away one of these new pressurizable conicals on December 31st. For every order you place with More Beer between November 1st and December 31st, use the coupon code CONICAL up to once every day to enter yourself into the drawing. Go to morebeer.com for more details. The 2009 More Beer season of winning. Win yourself some great deals and maybe even a brand new conical fermenter. Enter today only at morebeer.com.
Downtown Joe's, located in the historic Oberon building in beautiful downtown Napa, California, offers an award-winning brew pub experience from 8:30 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day. For 15 years at the corner of 2nd and Main, Downtown Joe's has been voted Best Night Spot 7 times and Best Brew Pub for the last 4 years in a row. Brewmaster Colin Kaminsky's handcrafted ales, like his Tail Wagon Amber Ale and Catherine the Great Imperial Stout, are the perfect accent to riverside dining, live music, and a relaxing outdoor patio. Don't miss the Beer of the Month, special rotating taps, and happy hour all day Mondays. Visit downtownjoes.com to make reservations, peruse their extensive calendar of events, or just read more about their fantastic beers. Come enjoy the fine beer, food, and music. Downtown Joe's, the award-winning brew pub where you'll feel at home.
Hilo, what's it feel like?
Take awesome and multiply it by 2.
Yeah! Spraying live beer radio all over your face.
Can't get any better than this, baby.
It's the Brewing Network.
Like the Lance Armstrong of the beer world. Except for that nut thing.
This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're speaking with AJ DeLange, one of the Uber beer geeks that I know, and John Palmer knows. Yeah, John bows down to you as an Uber geek as far as many things.
Yeah, whenever I have a question, I go rummaging through my hard drive looking for your papers. It's like, what did AJ say about that?
Yeah. That is a new level of geekiness if John Palmer refers to you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys, but Charlie Bamforth is a hard act to follow.
That's true.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to follow him, but I think you can definitely handle it. All right, so let's get back to color.
Okay, how's it measured? I think
yeah.
Was what you guys were interested in at this point. Well, I figured that question would be asked, so I kind of made a list, and I came up with 7 ways that I'm aware of, and there have probably been others. Obviously, in the early days, it was done by visual comparison, which is got a lot of problems associated with it, but it was the best they had. So I think the first thing they did was compare beer to iodine, and the colors are sort of similar.
Kind of reddish-brown based, huh?
Yeah, they're similar in the fact that they absorb a whole lot of light at the blue end of the spectrum and very little at the red end, orange and red end. So what they did was make up a 10th normal solution of iodine, and they put 100 milliliters of distilled water in a tube next to the beer sample, hold it up to a north window. That's the color of the light. Quality, as we mentioned before the break, depends, influences what you see. And then they would add bits of this 10th normal iodine to the solution until it matched as best it could they could make the match, the beer. And the number of milliliters of the iodine solution they added was what they called the color of the beer. And I just did an experiment this morning to see what the correspondence would be, and it looks like 1 milliliter of iodine solution corresponds to about 9.6 SRM. That, if you try to compare beer to iodine, I have a terrible time with it because of being colorblind. You guys might find it easy. I don't think it's the way we'd want to work, and we don't have to, of course, in the modern era. But the next attempt was the brand scale. You can set that up if you keep Victoria Yellow, Patent Blue, Fast Brown, and Bordeaux, whatever those are. They're dyes. mix them up with alcohol solution, make a bunch of dilutions of specified strengths, and look to see which one of those best matches the beer in a tube held up to north light. And the various dilutions are calibrated in units of iodine, actually. Then we come to Joseph Lovibond, whom I think we've all heard of. He was actually a brewer, and he had apparently noticed that beers in a certain color range were, in his opinion at least, the best beers. So he tried to find a more scientific or more repeatable or more mechanized way, I guess you might want to think of it. Or actually probably the big advantage of what he wanted to do was get away from the solutions, which change color over time. If the ingredients varied, you got differences in color and so on. So he came up with the idea of using colored glasses. Now, you probably remember from grammar school, or if you messed with photography, this business of primary colors, the color wheel with red, green, and blue 120 degrees apart around a circle, and yellow, magenta, and cyan. That's what the photographers, or what the engineers call those colors. Artists have different names for them. I can't remember which corresponds to which, but anyway, he came up with the concept of having tinted glasses of red, yellow, and blue, which were just glass doped with gold for the red, chromium for the yellow, and cobalt for the blue, and adjusted their strengths so that if you put 3 of the weakest on top of one another, you got kind of a neutral. And if you put stacked 2 of the same strength of yellow with 2 of the same strength of blue and 2 of the same strength with red, stacked all those up, you got a neutral. And evolved this scale, which is still in use today. But actually, there are several Lovibond scales out there, depending on what you're looking at. So apparently, the way the procedure worked is for the beer scale, the scale we as brewers call the Lovibond scale, the red and blue glasses are fixed, and you vary the yellow ones until you get the best color match. In this case, the tubes are held in an instrument, which also has these little glass slides in them. Now that's what a Lovibond tintometer used to look like. A modern Lovibond tintometer is actually a photometer, so they're doing what the modern folks do and measuring the absorption spectrum and then converting that through some math to the Lovibond units. And exactly what that conversion is, I assumed I would be asked, well, how do you convert between Lovibond and SRM and EBC? And the answer is, I don't know, because it's a little vague. The Lovibond 52 scale is the one that seems to be talked about all the time. The best information I can give you I'll give you 2 pieces of information with respect to that. One is that when the SRM scale, which we'll be getting to next, was evolved, one of the criteria for it was that it would match the Lovibond scale. So that says Lovibond and SRM are the same, or about the same, or the same for light beers. And you'll see those statements made in various places. On the other hand, if you go to Wireman's website, they have a table of EBC color versus Lovibond. And if you plot the points in that table and do a linear fit, you get a dead straight line that's just right on. And since SRM and EBC are related by a constant, you can come up with a relationship between SRM and Lovibond, which is 1.35 times Lovibond minus 0.76 equals SRM. Obviously, you got a problem at 0 Lovibond, but everywhere else it seems to work. Okay, so the Lovibond of the original tintometer, and that company is still in business, and they still make the instruments. But as I said, they're photometers now. So around just after the war, the ASB was looking for something that was less subjective. In other words, an instrumental method that didn't require having North Winter Light or Perfect Color Vision, and it would match the Lovemont scale to the extent that they could achieve that. So after some experimentation, these guys named Miller and Stone came up with the following definition. Beer color intensity on a sample free of turbidity and having the spectral characteristics of an average beer is 10 times the absorbance of the beer measured in a 1/2-inch cell with monochromatic light of wavelength 430 nanometers. So to restate that a little more simply, you put a sample of the beer in 1/2-inch cell, you shine 430 nanometers light, which is pretty deep blue, through it, and you measure the ratio of what came out to what came in, take the logarithm of that ratio, and multiply by 10. So nobody uses 1/2-inch cells and spectrometers anymore. They're all 1 centimeter, and the definition therefore changes to 12.7 times the absorbance in 1 centimeter. The key phrase in there is of average spectral characteristics. If you ask me what is the SRM of this creek, for example, I can put it in the spectrometer and I can measure the absorbance at 430 nanometers, but I can't define the SRM because the beer is not of average spectral characteristics. And we'll talk about that.
Well, and that's, I think that's the thing that was made clear to me during that BJCP project was, just because something may be of a blacker or redder or that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a darker SRM. SRM actually has to do with absorption, right? So
yeah, and just at that frequency. Well, John, you referenced in your book, as I recall, a paper of Charlie's, in which he had his students look at beers of the same SRM to see if the colors were the same, and they weren't. And the reason they aren't is because there are deviations from the average spectrum. And
the average color beer.
Yeah.
Yes, I guess you could call it the average color beer. And Miller and Stone, I don't think they knew what they were onto. But if you look at their paper, they have taken the absorption spectra and overlain them, and they all bundle up. They looked at 39 beers, but I think the darkest one was 7 SRM or something like that. And they have a little test. You not only take a measurement at 430, you take another measurement, I got it written down here somewhere, but I can't find it. 500, 600 nanometers, and take the ratio of the measurement 430 to the ratio at the longer wavelength. And if the ratio at the long wavelength to the short wavelength is too high, you say either the beer is turbid or it's not of average spectral characteristics. So you can go filter it or centrifuge it, repeat that test, see if you still have the right spectral shape, and if you do, then it has an SRM, and if you don't, you really don't. Now, this little test is in the modern ASBC's method of analysis, MOA, for measuring beer characteristics. So it doesn't say in the MOA what you do if the beer does not have average spectral characteristics, but that's what the paper that Charlie was talking about is all about.
I see.
And we'll get to that in just a second. Okay, the next method is the EBC method, which is used at European Brewing Convention, Congress, sorry. No, I think it's convention. Which is exactly the same as the ASBC method, because the measurement's taken in a 1 centimeter cuvette, and at 430 nanometers, but the multiplier is 25 instead of 12.7. So EBC is just about twice the SRM, and it's as simple as that. Now, you can get confused because EBC used to take their measurements at 530 nanometers, in which case there really is no comparison. So if you find a conversion formula that's anything other than about twice, then that's conversion from the old EBC system. to SRM and don't use that. Okay, we've touched a couple times here on this idea of same SRM, different color, average spectral characteristics, and non-average spectral characteristics. So it's obvious, and I think it's been obvious to everybody, that it'd be nice to have some kind of way of calculating the color that you see rather than just some number. Because after all, how can 10.7...
Yeah, kind of a multi-wavelength number or measurement rather than a single wavelength measurement.
Exactly. Now, really, to determine what color you're going to see, you need to know that whole spectrum. You need to know the spectrum of the light from the light source as modified and going through the beer. And you need 81 measurements spaced 5 nanometers apart to specify color per the ASTM standard E308, which is the official way of ASTM, American Society for Testing and Materials.
Yep.
They have many standards for many things, and the color is just one of them. So 81 measurements, taken 5 nanometers apart, processed through some math, and you can then calculate a color in any of various color spaces, like RGB, red, green, blue, which is familiar to most everybody that's ever fiddled around with a computer or a modern computer, but other systems as well, such as LAB, and that's a luminance and 2 color axes. In other words, a brightness and 2 different kinds of color. And the ASBC has a new method which does that. And obviously it's not as simple to do the math as it is to do for the simple SRM measurement, but then, with a spreadsheet or a calculator, or even many spectrophotometers can be programmed to do it, to read out directly in XYZ units or RGB units or LAB units or YCV or whatever color units you like. But there is a shortcoming in that ASBC tri-stimulus method, in that it only computes the color you see if you're holding the beer very close to your face, so that it subtends 10 degrees. The CIE, the Commission Internationale de l'Éclairage, that defines the underlying color science. They call that the 10-degree observer. Well, I usually don't hold the beer 4 inches from my face. I usually hold it at an arm's length, where it subtends more like 2 degrees. And the other observer that the CIE specifies is the 2-degree observer. And why ASBC chose the 10-degree observer and the 2-degree observer, I couldn't say, but they did. 1 centimeter path. I don't usually look at my beer in a 1 centimeter cuvette unless I'm about to put it in the spectrophotometer. I see I'm looking at this ale through what must be a 6 centimeter path at the moment. Unfortunately, it's gotten kind of low, so there's only about 4 centimeters left in the glass. Hope we got another break coming up pretty soon so I can run downstairs.
Beer break. People think it's for commercials. No, it's so we can get some beer.
Exactly. I figured that one out. Let's see what else. Oh, yes, they had to pick an illuminant, and they picked illuminant C, which is typical of a mix of daylight and tungsten. Was actually picked by the magazine publishers to resemble the light that they thought the housewives would experience when they were reading the glossy ladies' magazines at the kitchen table with a light on near the window. So that's the color science behind illuminant C. But it does give you a tri-stimulus color, an actually visible color. I'm just not sure what value it is, because you don't look at beer under those circumstances. So finally, the last method is the method I call augmented SRM, which is something I came up with, which is the subject of the paper that Charlie mentioned. It was interesting. Last time I was in public, if you will, with Charlie, he was doing a paper on haze, and I was doing this paper. So what the augmented SRM method does is recognize that because beers generally don't deviate that much from average spectral characteristics, that the SRM itself actually conveys a lot of color information. You would be surprised how accurately you can reproduce the absorption spectrum of a beer from just its SRM. I mean, obviously, if it's a lambic or something like that, that's not going to work. So what the augmented SRM method does is take those same 81 measurements that is taken for the ASBC tri-stimulus method and encode the difference between its normalized spectrum, as represented by those 81 points, and the average normalized spectrum. And those differences can be encoded by a couple numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, with the number of numbers required having to do with how strange the beer is, if you like. And I won't get into the encoding method. That's what the paper is all about. You can get it from the ASBC. I'll mention it has to do with principal components analysis. Engineers listening or statisticians listening may know something about that. But it turns out it's the computations are more complicated than basic SRM. But with a spreadsheet or a calculator, they're very easy to do. And actually, you can get a spreadsheet from my website, www.wetnewf, as in wet Newfoundland dog, .org. If you have spectral information, you can plop it into this spreadsheet, and boom, up comes the SRM and what I call the spectral deviation coefficients, and there are instructions with it and everything, and you can figure out how to use it and what it does. So that, in a nutshell, is what I know about how to measure beer color.
Well, and that brings up a good question. Anyway, most of our listeners are, concerned about. We've got a number of craft brewers out there, but probably the bulk is homebrewers, and they're just as curious about color as their craft brew counterparts, I think. Is there an easy, a simple way? I know you can measure the spectrophotometer, but is there an easier, cheaper way to measure beer color?
Well, sure, and we hope to give people another one pretty soon. But the basic way that a home brewer can do it is the method that was promulgated by George Fix many years ago, and that's comparing your beer to a beer whose SRM you know. And, of course, the big shortcoming with that is where are you going to get SRM values for a particular beer. Now, George Fix had one that he thought he knew what the SRM values were for. I think it was Michelob Dark or something like that.
Yeah.
And if indeed you have a beer and you know what its color is, you're fine. But before I would proclaim that people can do that, I would need to, and this is something I've been meaning to do, is, I think Guinness is probably a pretty good standard. I would need to go out and buy Guinness this month and measure its color, and then do it next month and the month after and the month after. And after, a year of getting various batch numbers of Guinness, be convinced that, Guinness really is 53 SRM, then tell people, okay, you can use Guinness as a standard. It's 53 SRM. Seems to me Guinness would be good because you can get it anywhere in the country. Mm-hmm. And I assume it's all, I think it's brewed in Canada, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
Not really sure either, but if it all comes out of the same plant, it should all be the same color. And I kind of doubt that with a beer that dark, they really worry about the fact that this batch is 53 SRM instead of 52. Right. But that's why I need to get data over.
That's why you think I think if you had something in the 17 SRM range, then it may be dark enough that you could do most of your measurements, because you have to have a beer that's darker than or no darker than. Well, no, you can.
No, not
that's true. You can dilute yours. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Although it probably just wouldn't work with something like Budweiser, really.
No.
that would probably be your limiting factor there.
So, if you guys could think of a beer that's in about the right color range that's available to anybody.
Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. No.
Well,
Sierra Nevada Porter, that's pretty darn available.
How consistent are they? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, find out.
Sam Adams Boston Lager. Maybe.
Sam Adams. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll start looking at that. Okay, so given that you've got something that you know is the standard, what do? You go back to what the old guys did with the iodine: put it in 2 tubes and make various dilutions until you get a match, and then the color just scales. If you think Sam Adams is 20, let's say 17, and you did a 1-to-1 dilution of the Sam Adams to match your beer, then your beer would be at 8.5. There's going to be some variability because of because they're not strictly average spectrally. I would like the beer that I would promulgate as a standard to be pretty close to spectrally average, and Guinness kind of isn't, so that makes it not too desirable a candidate. The Sam might be it.
AJ, when you talk about spectrally similar or spectrally average, I'm assuming that we're talking about, I guess in essence, the same grain bill. That is the same material makeup of the beer versus other beers, or is it more than that?
Right, well, you could have a beer made from like all pale malts, and enough of them, and versus a beer that's made with some roasted barley to get you to the same kind of SRM, right? And they're going to look different.
Well, one of the most amazing things about this that I learned was it doesn't seem to matter where the color comes from, whether it came from the malt or whether it came from low kiln malts, medium kiln malts, or the ones that were really burnt, or whether the color was developed through decoction mashing or through a longer boil time. The colors still all seem to be the same. And an implication of that is that the coloring materials are in fixed relationships to one. I mean, there's obviously more than one coloring material in there.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk hundreds.
When you talk about the color, are you talking about the measured color or the visual appearance where somebody would say, oh, that's, like my wife goes, well, that's Swiss coffee, and that's, Snowbird. I'm like, yeah, they're white.
No, I'm talking about the measured color.
So the measured color would be the same, but visually, the average beer geek would look at them and say, well, they look like different colors to me. If the grist was different.
Absolutely, but a beer of 50 SRM and a beer of 4 SRM can have the same spectral characteristics in this sense, because what we're doing is normalizing by the SRM value.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're doing is measuring the spectrum of the beer and dividing it by its value at 430 nanometers. So even though in the light beer the absorption is 0.3, and in the much darker beer it's 7, the normalized spectra both have a value of 1 at 430 nanometers. Now, what counts is what the rest of the tails away from 430 nanometers look like, and it's just amazing how closely they overlay one another.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea behind this augmented scheme is to quantify those relatively small misalignments.
Okay. Interesting.
Well, all right. So back to the simple way for brewers to measure the dilution with a known beer, right? And then
that and just hold them up to light.
Mm-hmm.
That's a scheme that works.
And what you're looking for is the color intensity. You're not looking for,
Well, Yeah, I'm going to say color intensity. A lot of people will phrase that question as, well, you're just talking about lightness and darkness, right? And the answer is no. You're really looking for color intensity because of the fact that beers have similar average or have similar spectral characteristics close to the average means that they have similar color behaviors. Now, the darker a beer is, the redder it is. So there's definitely a color shift with SRM. So if you're comparing beers around 4, you're looking for things that are similarly yellow. But if you're comparing beers around 17, you're looking for beers that are similarly red. So you want to get the closest color match you can. And if the beers both have identical or near identical normalized spectra, then they will be the same color, and that should not be a problem for you. However, the SRM measurement is made in the blue part of the spectrum, so I came up with this idea of how can we measure the amount of blue light that is coming through the beer. And it clicked on me one day that everybody has a gadget in his possession these days that has a blue filter in it. That's his little pocket digital camera or his fancy digital SLR. So I experimented briefly, and this is something I need to get back to, with taking the standard beer and making various dilutions of it so that, when you look at it, you see this one's lighter than this one, this one's lighter than this one, this one's lighter than this one. Tip a light table up on the end, put the beer, line these flasks or bottles. The best thing is if you can get square bottles. Line these up in front of the light table and move the unknown around until it lies between two beers, one of which is lighter than darker. So they have a sequence going from light to dark. Well, it's not really that important that you do that. Then take a picture with your digital camera, put it into Photoshop or whatever you use to process pictures, pull out the blue channel, use whatever. I'm a Mac guy. Mac has a little tool that will tell you the color of any pixel on the screen. Mm-hmm. And of course, Photoshop lets you do that too. So just then make a plot of all the colors, all the blue values as you go up in SRM. And remember, they're all labeled except for the unknown. And you get a surprisingly straight line, and you just interpolate off that straight line the SRM value. Mm-hmm. And the few tests I did with that just worked unbelievably well. Now, again, I need to get more data. Yeah, I mean, blue is blue. It's not. It's hardly limiting you to 430 nanometers. But I think this is something guys could experiment with. Well, of course, you can't really experiment with it unless you get ground truth somehow. So, people, there are guys out there in the hobby that work in a lab or go to college and have access to a spec. I wish some of them would join me in checking this out. And then finally, they now make 430 nanometer LEDs, which sell for 60 cents a piece. Mm-hmm. And they also make these nifty little chips that measure light intensity and convert them to a frequency. And it seems to me I ought to be able to put together a little block of plastic with one of these LEDs in one end, a hole for a cuvette in the middle, and one of these receptors, and hook them up to a microprocessor and have a simple little photometer that measures light attenuation at 430 nanometers. How would you calibrate it? Well, either with a beer of known SRM, but in this case, actually, an inexpensive neutral density filter will serve as well. Mm-hmm. And I've actually done that in a breadboard level. And I got a guy who's a microprocessor whiz, and he thinks he's got that going. So it's a matter of us getting some time to try to see if we can put this little box together for under $100. That would be the goal. Mm-hmm. There's a catch. It really works better if you have a good 530 nanometer filter in there, and those things are expensive. Mm. So that's we're hoping someday we might, you might be selling those in the store.
Cool. All right.
I'd get one.
But don't hold your breath.
Well, when you get those prototypes, you need somebody to test them out.
Hey.
John and I are here for you.
All right.
And we're not just begging for free stuff. All right, let's take a short break, and when we come back, let's get back into color and how you control it in the brew house. Back after this.
Keep your carboy cap on. This is Brew Strong.
We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Push from the Brewing Network, and I want to tell you about the Brewmaster's Warehouse and how you can get 10% off your next order. I'm a pretty techie guy, but I've never seen an online store like this. It's awesome. Go to brewmasterswarehouse.com and click on Brew Builder. You can whip up a custom recipe so easily even Sven could do it. Seriously, it's slick. You can share your recipe with your own logo and notes to the Brewmaster's database if you want. And the best part, it keeps a running tally of the beer you're building while you're doing it. Then, bam, click Buy Recipe, and your cart is filled and ready to go with helpful suggestions in case you forgot something. This thing is amazing. Brewmaster's Warehouse is run the way a homebrewer would do it, with great service, fast turnaround, and $6.99 flat rate shipping. Brewmaster's Warehouse and the Brew Builder blew me away. Check it out today at brewmasterswarehouse.com. I'm serious. And don't forget to put BNARMY in the discount code box for 10% off your order. Check out brewmasterswarehouse.com. Cheers.
BN Army members, are you looking for a discount on hops? Keep listening. Nico's Homebrew Supply at nicobrew.com has hops by the ounce and by the pound. Choose from varieties like Amarillo, Centennial, East Kent Goldings, Hollertower, Simcoe, Summit, Tomahawk, Warrior, Willamette, and more. And adding new varieties all the time, many for less than $20 a pound. Whether a couple ounces at a time or an 11-pound bag, all hops are shipped vacuum sealed and frozen straight to you. Nico's Homebrew Supply offers store-wide $5 flat rate shipping and won't waste your money on unnecessary overhead or advertising. They're going bare bones and passing the savings on to you. The staff at Nico's Homebrew Supply loves to brew and is committed to keeping homebrewing affordable and accessible to anyone who wants to join in this great hobby. And for a limited time, use coupon code BNARMY at checkout for a Brewing Network discount. Visit nicobrew.com. That's Niko brew.com for your hops and more. nicobrew.com, your bare bones buddy in the brewing business.
Hey, what are you doing, man?
Writing a review of WLP 400.
What? You're reviewing yeast?
Yeah. White Labs has home brewer reviews of all their strains. Are you new to these interwebs? Check it out.
That's awesome.
White Labs, your source for great yeast, invites all brewers to visit whitelabs.com to read and write your own reviews of all their yeast strains. Get real-world tips and tricks from other brewers who have made the most of their vials and post your own experiences. It's another way White Labs brings you closer to the best yeast on the planet.
And send. There you go.
You misspelled flocculate, dude.
What?
White Labs. It's all in the vial.
You're listening to the Brewing Network.
Back to your hosts, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. Putting the testicles in technical. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're speaking with AJ DeLange. And, AJ, John and I are both, during the break, going, all right, we're following along a little bit. We understand some of it.
I definitely understand now what Palmer was saying, that AJ's his go-to guy.
Right. Well, and it's such a complex subject. It's not. There's no simple answer. It's not, well, it's black or it's white. This is a tricky thing to really understand and measure, and there's a lot to it.
We have science for a reason.
Yeah, and it's not just, and the difficulty comes in not just measuring it, but what that means to us as people, and how we view it, and how
you guys doubtless have some appreciation for how large a science color science is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I got the basic volume here is kind of the classic Wieseskian styles, 950 pages, and they don't even mention beer. They mention beer's law, but they don't mention beer. And all that's gone into giving us the displays we have for computers and high-def TVs now, and the schemes for compression of the data, so you can send a high-def picture over the internet or over the air. It's just it's amazing. It's an interesting marriage of engineering and psychology.
So, I would bet your perception of color changes based on your mood, even. When you mention psychology.
I'm sure all these color spaces we talk about, they're based on what the CIE called the standard observer. And, he's an average, just like these spectral characteristics are average. This average observer, the 2-degree observer, was measured in 1931 or 34, but, a long time ago. Have we evolved since then? Don't know. How much variation is there between people? I'm colorblind, so that's obviously
that makes you a deviant.
Average observer. Well, yeah, in one of many ways, actually. But my wife, for example, does not see blue to the extent that other people do, because I can, show her a Photoshop picture and say, "How's that look?" And she says, "Oh, that looks yellow." So, all right, let me push the blue slider, and how's that look now? Oh, that looks fine. And there's an appreciable amount of extra blue. She's not colorblind, but she's not a standard observer, and not standard in many other ways too. She lives with a deviant.
Colors are perception.
Yeah. Yes. And I think you probably all know about accommodation, that if you look at a picture of the American flag and stare at it for a few minutes, you might have seen this in a psychology book, and then stare at a blank sheet of paper. Instead of seeing a red, white, and blue flag, you'll see a gray, yellow, and cyan flag. So, it's exactly the same as taste. You get palate fatigue, you get eye fatigue as well.
It is one complex subject. All right, what more do we need to understand before we can get into how you control color in the brew house?
Oh, I think we're about ready to talk about that.
Okay.
I made a list of points here. We talked about how to measure it, how it's defined, what average spectrum is, a little bit of the history. Okay, I think we can talk about how to control it, which is about like controlling haze. I think we'll find.
Okay. So, what are the factors? Obviously, grain bill. And you're saying the actual measured color doesn't matter how you get to it, whether it's highly kilned or lower kiln malts. The measured color is the measured color, although the
hue
perceived
may change.
Appearance would be different for the different beers.
Well, that's true. Now, remember that a lot of things can change the perceived hue, and one of the first we mentioned was how wide the glass you look at the beer is.
Lighting.
All and the light quality. So remember,
light source, right?
Beer is ultimately red because it absorbs blue light and does not absorb red light very much. So really, however you got the color, there is a correlation between a strong correlation between the SRM and the actual hue. And that goes back to this idea that all beer spectra are more or less the same, so that SRM actually conveys a lot of color information.
Okay.
So that... Sorry?
Go ahead, Jay. Go ahead.
So when you go to design, I'm sure this is of great interest to the listeners, how do I design a beer for 26 SRM?
Mm-hmm.
And I got to say, John, I think your book has got probably one of the most concise, thorough treatments of that I've seen a lot of stuff in the homebrewing literature on that. And I think you just cover the ground at about the right level. And
thank you.
Yeah, well, absolutely deserved. And I think your conclusions are that if you can get within 20%, you're doing well.
Yeah.
I think that's the bottom line there. Because if you look at all the uncertainties, and you mentioned a lot of them, there are many. Knowing that we'd be talking about this, I paid some attention to color in the last beer I brewed, which I usually don't do simply because I sort of feel it's going to turn out where it turns out. I know generally that my pilses are going to be between 4 and 7 and so on, and leave it at that. But I paid attention this time, so first thing I do is look at the malt bag. First thing I do is go to Wireman's website, not Wireman in this case, it was Crisp, and look at malt specs. What are they? No, it wasn't Crisp either. That doesn't matter. So let's talk about Wireman. They list their Pilsner malt is between 2 and 4 EBC units. Well, that's fine, but that's like a 50% uncertainty. I used some crystal malt. It said 130 to 170 Lovibond. That's quite a range there. Yeah. I don't know what conversion from Lovibond to SRM I should be using. And that's just one of many other variables, like how much color gets developed in the boil. Certainly a 2-hour boil will develop a lot more color than a 1-hour boil. I went to a thing over in Belgium a couple of years back called the pH Paradox, where they discussed all aspects of pH in brewing, and they talked about the relationship of pH on the amount of color developed, and the slide that discussed that mentioned that 2/3 of the color are developed in the mash tun and the kettle, and 1/3 in at the maltings. And I'm not sure I believe the ratios are really that extreme, but certainly a lot of color. You guys do decoction mashing, right? How do you tell your decoction is thoroughly mixed? This dark stuff you pump back in is thoroughly blended with the light stuff that was left behind in the rest mash. So, certainly heat develops color.
Yeah.
pH has an effect on it. Charlie mentioned oxidized polyphenols. Oxygen has an effect on it.
And let me interrupt you here a moment.
Sure.
Colin Kaminsky at Downtown Joe's, he heard you were going to be on the show, and he wanted to be here to ask a question, but wasn't able to, and so he wanted me to make sure, since you're mentioning the pH affecting color, he wants to know how does mash pH and boil pH affect color. For example, at a mash pH of 5.2 versus 5.4, he says he can see a definite color difference in his beer. And what exactly is the process that's causing this to happen, and what can he expect?
Well, I would be hard-pressed to describe the process. I'll give you a theory in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But as for quantitative data, if he has de Klerk, page 309 of Volume 1, has some data, which actually apparently was cooked up by Windisch and Kolbach. You remember Bob Kolbach, John?
Yes, I do.
He'll tell you about that.
Yeah, brother of Paulus, yes.
Yeah. Without going through this whole table here, let's see. pH before boiling of 6.28 showed an increase in color during the boil of 0.32 iodine units. So that would be about 3.2 SRM. And if the pH was as low as 5.16, it was only half that, so about 1.5 SRM. It appears from this data that it's the hop tannins in this case that have a fair amount to do with it, because if you don't have hops in there, there is additional color development, which is a function of pH, but it's appreciably less. Now, as to what the mechanism might be, and I'm wildly speculating here, you ever notice what happens when you put lemon in tea?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It bleaches.
Right. And
I think if you look at equations for oxidation reduction potential, you'll find that the ORP depends on the pH at which the reaction takes place, and that's because so many of these organic oxidation reductions, the electrons come from hydrogen ion, and you'll see it written as oxidized state plus a hydrogen ion plus an electron equals reduced state. Mm-hmm. So I think it's that dependence of I think it's the presence of the hydrogen ion itself that's causing the reductions. Too bad Charlie isn't here. He is still there. He could probably give you a better answer to that than I can. But moved by that, I tried a couple little experiments myself this morning, and I found similar things. That if I took a finished beer and added some acid to it, if I took this 22 SRM beer and put enough hydrochloric acid in it to drop the pH to 3.5, and it's probably I didn't write down what it is. It must be about 3.8. It's an ale. Then I got a loss in color of about a unit, and if I got more extreme, it would drop another unit or so. So it's I think something you can count on.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, I went back and looked at some data on brews that I'd done for comparisons, trying to do two ales exactly the same for a class, and found the converse to be true, that the beer that read lower pH in throughout the brewing process, in the mash tun and the boil and the finished beer, actually had more color.
Right. Well, there's so many factors involved. That's one of the things that, for me, everything relates back to yeast. So your yeast pitching rate and yeast growth, that's going to affect the amount of color as well.
Absolutely. And another piece of anecdotal information for you there is I got in some discussion with somebody on the forum, had some question about color, so I went and measured the beer, which was handiest, which was what happened to be in the fermenter. It was a Vienna, and put it in a centrifuge tube and spun the yeast out and measured it, and it came in at 15. So I said, well, this particular beer with this particular blend of malts came out at 15, and I think the point had something to do with what the nature of the high kiln malts was. And kind of forgot about that until the beer was out of the fermenter and well lagered and ready for analysis, and I measured it, and it was at 11. So those yeast took out 4 units of color. And sometimes what you find at the bottom of the tun is the yeast are kind of dark. They're grabbing that stuff and hauling it out.
Right.
So I guess we're emphasizing this idea of variability with pH, what the yeast carry out, the amount of whether you do triple decoction or single infusion, whether you do 1 hour boil or 2 hour boil. All these things have an effect on color, and not to mention the composition of the grist, of course, and the water.
So essentially, we're saying we have no idea.
Well, I think it's not that bad. If that Mowry curve that you have in your book, that's a pretty good fit.
Well, now, all right. So let's say we're able to kind of target in our grist to give us a certain color, but we're not getting what we'd expect. Beer's turning out with less color intensity, more. what what sort of things should somebody look for? Oxidation. Boy, this is a difficult subject. Let's put it this way: if I came to you and said, AJ, I'm using the exact same grist, but my beer is turning out too dark. What's the kind of troubleshooting you'd go through?
Well, I guess the first thing I would do is say same lot numbers for the malts. And if you said no, I'd say, well, what does it say on the package? Is there a range of variability on the package there? That might be it. Right. Did you boil longer than you usually do? Was the kettle pH higher than it usually is? Did you pitch less than you usually do? Did you treat your water the same way? Those would be the things I'd think of.
Yeah.
Did you splash the wort more than you intended?
Yeah, oxidation.
Oxidation, it definitely makes it darker. You pick up and that'll do. Now, all right. So let me devil's advocate here on the grain, the variability of the grain. Now, certainly there's color variations, but don't those maltsters try and hold it, as tight as possible in a range? I mean, they list a wide range, but don't they try and get sort of in the same range so their customers, which are really commercial brewers, end up with the same beer? I'm
guessing that probably only to a limited extent. I'm guessing that they kiln the crystal under a certain temperature program that they've developed over experience. And I'm guessing that with each lot of malt they buy, they will probably do a measurement or two, and just to see if they're outside of that range that they're specifying. And if they could control it to a tighter range, I would think they would specify a tighter range. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine certainly that a large brewery is going to measure the color themselves. But a home brewer is not going to do a Congress mash and take a spectrophotometric measurement for each malt he uses.
No. We know there's home brewers out there doing that. Well, how about you? But, I mean, come on.
No, I don't do that. A Congress mash
lately
is a bit of a pain.
Yeah.
And if I'm using 5 malts in a beer, I don't want to do a Congress mash on each of 5 malts.
I guarantee you there's somebody out there doing it.
Well, you're probably right. And that's the way to do it. Use your experience. You remember the large brewery does the same thing the same way day after day after day after day after day.
Right.
And they know their materials. They probably just look at a load of malt and say, gee, this visually it looks a little darker than it usually does. Maybe we better do the test mash on this.
Right.
And of course they handle the wort the same and the beer the same way every time, so they don't get the variability in there that the home brewers do.
All right. Continuing my devil's advocate here now, on boil time, was it Chris Colby at BYO? Didn't he have do some sort of article on boil time where they boiled some all Pilsner malt for 60 minutes and then boiled another one for 120 or 180, and then compared what they looked like and found very little difference or something like that?
I'm not aware of that article. I'm a little surprised if they found very little difference.
Well, and I wonder how much color development you do get from a boil.
Well,
is that quantified anywhere?
Depends
on the boil. Depends on the equipment.
Yeah.
Depends on the grist. Yeah. Depends on the gravity, the wort gravity. Depends on a lot of things, huh?
Absolutely. It depends on how you fire the kettle, for example. I think the color comes from 3 things: oxidized polyphenols, melanoidins, which are these complex amino acid sugar compounds, and caramelization, which is just burning of sugar. And I think you're going to have a lot darker beer if you're gas fired than if you're steam fired, for example, because I think you get more caramelization.
Okay. All right, so your heating method that can be making your beer darker. Now, what about if I came to you and said, I'm not getting nearly as much color? Obviously, the same series of things, although you probably wouldn't worry about oxidation. You wouldn't worry about what.
Well, so you're saying that the beer color came out lighter than anticipated?
Right. You've been making this beer time and time again. Now it's come out lighter. The malt it's the same sack of malt you used before. Why is it coming out lighter? I'm trying to get the typical things that somebody might.
I think that's a lot less likely than too much color.
Right.
I would almost like the over-pitching, under-pitching thing.
The yeast pitching rates.
I'd have to point to
boil intensity.
Well, maybe boil
maybe
intensity.
A windy day.
Yeah, or pour extraction, perhaps.
Pour extraction. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean
that's very easy to fix.
Right.
Use more dark malt. Boil longer. Those are the two obvious ones.
Well, what about dilution? A lot of times people, it's a humid day, it's a windy day, it's a dry day, it's a cold day, it's a hot day. All that's going to affect, and they don't measure precisely the volumes that they're working with.
That's tough to do. Yeah, certainly if you're typically boil off 5 gallons and you only boiled off 2, that beer is going to be lighter in color.
Mm-hmm. So that's probably a big factor right there.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is. Not only because I think of the concentration of the coloring things, but I think the more concentrated the solutions, the more likely the darkening reactions are to take place.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, and the question I get all the time, all right, and I don't know if you know the answer to this one, but how do you make a red beer? What's the most red way to make a red appearance beer?
Get a lot of color in there. I see that one a lot too, and I kind of chuckle at it because all beer is red.
Like you said earlier, it's.
So if you want to make it redder, make it dark. I always tell people, take a glass of stout, Guinness stout, your stout, anybody's stout, and shine a flashlight through it.
It's red.
That's the deepest, purest red you'll ever see. If you want your beer to be redder, you do that. Now, they don't. That's not what they mean, of course. What they mean is something that really. My Christmas ale, I want it to match Santa's costume or something of that sort.
Right.
The only way to do that I know of is with cherry juice. I mean, creeks and framboises are really, really red. In terms of this work I do with the spectral deviation, I'd say you need to put stuff in there to get yourself a positive first spectral deviation coefficient. Because what that coefficient does is it's a measure of redness. Actually, it's a measure of creekness. The only reason I typically find that a beer like a Budweiser is a minus 0.9, and that's saying Budweiser does not look anything like a creek. And a Miller Lite is minus 0.6, and again, that's saying that doesn't look anything like a creek. And a Qingdao is minus 0.4, and that says that doesn't look like a creek. But Purple Haze Raspberry Wheat is a plus 1.16, and Lindemann's Creek is a plus 1.78. So I think the answer to the question, how do you get it to appear red, is put fruit juice in it. Otherwise, just make it darker.
Right.
And
all
as you
beer
make
is
it
red.
darker, it will become redder. And I think what they really want to do is get it dark enough that it doesn't look black. Light enough that you can still see color. And the more color they can, higher the SRM they can get it, still see color, the redder it's going to look.
No, I think the government's cutting you off here. You've revealed too many secrets. A little audio problem there, but let's do this. Let's. Can you stick with us a few more minutes? I know we're like an hour past when we said we would keep you busy.
No problem. I got beer.
Okay, great. Let's take a short break. When we come back, we got some questions from the chat room for you. Back after this.
Brew smart.
Brew strong. This is Brew Strong.
Hey, Push, the new brewery's looking good.
Thanks, Finn. Piece by piece.
Well, let's fire her up. Whoa! Is that a new kettle?
Yeah, just got it brand new, but paid half price.
What? And that blade scale?
40% off.
The new tap handle?
$5 instead of $13. Got a new regulator for the brew stand, too, but $5 instead of $25.
Dude, where are you stealing all this stuff from?
Where else? The More Beer deal of the day.
Announcing the Beer, and More Beer deal of the day. Every day, a new fantastic deal from big items to small that will blow you away. Boil kettles, carboy carriers, sterile siphon starters, digital timers. Watch morebeer.com every day for a new deal, and you just might find the item you've been waiting for at a price you cannot believe. Hurry, because stock is limited on most items.
And that sweet Guinness cap, let me guess.
The More Beer deal of the day.
Yeah, I knew it. Come on, let's brew something. Find the More Beer deal of the day at morebeer.com. Celebrity voices impersonated.
Nico, listen, our lawyers said that we had to do this for 1 hour, and after this, we don't have to talk to each other for 3 more months to the next meeting.
Kids, come on, let's get out of here.
I'm supposed to have more lines. I'm the professional. Hey, it's Sully.
And I'm Nico.
And we opened the 21st Amendment 9 years ago at 563 2nd Street in San Francisco, just 2 blocks from Giants Park, to make great beer and have a great time doing it.
That's right, because to us, the 21st Amendment is more than just the right to make beer. It's the right to experiment, to be innovative, and just do things differently. And so now, we're putting our craft beer in cans.
That's right, cans. You can find our world-famous Hell or High Watermelon Wheat Beer and Brew Free or Die IPA throughout California and Alaska.
And now it's also available on draft at select accounts in the Bay Area.
So next time you're at your local neighborhood pub or good beer store, be sure to ask for 21st Amendment in cans.
Because everyone likes it in the can.
Tasty crack cans.
Tasty crack cans.
This is www.thebrewingnetwork.com.
Sit down next to it, grab yourself a paper towel, and watch those yeast have sex.
You're listening to the Brewing Network.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
All right, we're back with AJ DeLange talking beer color. And I think you killed Justin. He wasn't able to, it made his head explode.
You're dying over here, AJ.
Yeah.
I've changed your name in the chat to AJ the Brain DeLange, mostly because you've turned mine to mush.
Well, as I'm getting older, mine's turned to mush too. So welcome to the club.
All right, good.
All right, so as you know, these shows are done live, and there's a chat room you can go to and participate in, discuss, what we're talking about with like-minded individuals, and ask questions, and we'll answer them right here on the show. So what do we got from the chat room today, Justin?
All right, a few good questions came through. Karev is still in the chat, been hanging out with us today. And he wants to know, should all maltsters now be using the new EBC scale that you've talked about? That's his first part of his question.
So as far as I'm concerned, hell yes.
Yeah.
Better yet, they can use SRM as far as I'm concerned.
So instead of measuring at, 530 nanometers, they're measuring at 430, or right?
Well, no, they're not measuring at 430, at 530 anymore.
Right.
EBC is now 430, same as SRM.
Right.
It's the old Lovabond system which I'm not sure exactly how it maps into the modern systems. And as I mentioned earlier, because the current Lovibond tintometers are really photometers now, I suspect that these guys that are still publishing Lovibond numbers for their malts are doing so because back in the lab there's this old instrument that the guy that founded the brewery bought that still uses the Lovibond glasses. If they're using a modern instrument and translating to Lovibond, then they should at least give an EBC or SRM number as well, because the instrument's capable of calculating it. And by the way, some do. Some will give a Lovibond number and an EBC number.
Okay, so if you see an EBC number, you pretty much trust that, or SRM number. If it's in Lovibond's the one that is really kind of antiquated, and
right.
you got to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I just for low colors, I'd just assume SRM and EBC are about the same. For the high colors, I'd take Wireman at their word and divide the Lovibond number by 1.3 or 1.4 and go with that.
Interesting. AJ, I mean, is the method that brewers use to measure color, do you see that changing in the future anytime soon? I mean,
I'm trying to push this augmented SRM thing, but haven't had much luck. I've set the ASBC a straw man method of analysis, MLA they call them. They have published A, B, and C, and I sent them a straw man D, and it reads almost exactly like the tri-stimulus method that they currently use. My spies tell me that he doesn't think that they, this. If you read this paper, your head really will go to mush. All these eigenvalues, all that stuff is. It's non-trivial to explain it, but Charlie made me put all that stuff in there. He's the editor.
Yeah.
Well, I think you mentioned that when you gave us. So I put it all in there, and it's one of those things that's very simple to do, but a little difficult to understand.
Well, Charlie's got a resilient brain. I think that's the reason why he was able to put up with that.
Okay, the second question from Karev is he wants to know, in Pro Mash, what's the difference in using the Rager, Morey, or Daniels formula settings?
Slightly different answers. I find the Morey scheme the most appealing, simply because it seems to fit the data better. Now, I don't have the same coefficients and exponent as he does, but it does allow for the fact that that you're not. Well, what am I trying to say? The way I do it is, I say Congress mash is a ratio of 9 to 1. 9 grams of water per gram of malt. So if you take the SRM reading or Lovibond reading or EBC reading, you assume that is proportional to the amount of coloring material in the malt. So you take the number they publish and divide by 1/9, or multiply by 9, same thing, and then you multiply by your grain weight to total mash weight ratio, and that gives you an idea of what the coloration depth would be if you had 100% utilization. Then you put that exponent on there to account for these losses and gains in color, and you do just exactly what Morey did. He got a set of data and found the exponent that fit best, and that's what a good junior scientist does. The problem is that you want to do that for your data set, not Ray Daniels, which I think is what Morey did. But unless you have a means of measuring SRM yourself, that's hard to do. So you go with the Morey method. The Morey method at least goes through 0 at if you put no coloring material in there, and the other two are straight fits, as I recall.
Yeah, they're linear fits.
And I got the book right here someplace. You can probably tell me what page it's on, John.
Actually, I can't. It's in the back. That's all.
In the back, yeah. Okay.
There's Mosher, Daniels, and Maury quoted in there, and Mosher and Daniels are linear fits to the data, and I believe Daniels crosses the y-axis at 7, and and Mosher goes down at I think 5.
Yeah, I'd say maybe 8 for Daniels, but
okay.
I would think you'd remember the page number if you can remember that. 271.
Oh, okay.
Well, and I'd always say that, just pick a formula, stick with it, and, get to learn what the results are based on your brewing practices, what the beer looks like, and, just have that in mind. So
Absolutely.
If it says 40... you know what 40 looks like, and if you want it darker or lighter, then you want it darker or lighter, and so same thing with IBUs, same thing with all that. Just pick one and brew a whole bunch and stay with one of them. If you jump formulas, you're starting over.
You're chasing your own tail. Yep.
All right, another question for the brain. Bike Foolery's hanging out in the chat room, and he wants to know, does beer cloudiness throw these measurements off, like measuring a Belgian wit or a super hopped IPA?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'll read the first part of the ASBC definition of color. Beer color intensity on a sample free of turbidity and having the spectral characteristics of an average beer. So, yes, this was like over an hour ago, but I mentioned that you take measurements not only at 430 nanometers, but at 700 nanometers. And the measurement at 700 nanometers, if it's not less than 0.039 times the measurement at 430, then you have a problem, either a spectral characteristics problem or a turbidity problem. And both the EBC and the ASBC protocols in this case require you to filter the beer or centrifuge it. EBC specifies turbidity directly as a less than 1. Well, I don't even know if I can say this word. Nephelometric. I said it once. Nephelometric turbidity unit. Then you have to filter it. So yes, it has to be clear. Because remember, well, if the questioner was on board when Charlie was there, he mentioned that turbidity scatters light, and light that gets scattered doesn't reach the detector in the photometer, so the beer will
measure darker,
read higher. Yeah, measure darker.
All right. And one last question from the chat. Wood's hanging out with us. He's got a question about Cinnamar. Wants to brew a black IPA. He wants to know, how much Cinnamar would I need to add to a 6-gallon batch that's about 50% Maris Otter and 50% pills, plus some dextrin to get beyond the 24 SRM, he says. So he knows it's going to, Jamil, if this helps you too, he knows it's going to be about a 1076 beer and about 80 IBUs.
Yeah, I calculated this out at one point.
Yeah.
And
well, then you better answer the question.
It's in my BYO Schwarzbier article.
Okay.
So if you're subscribed to BYO and you can get a subscription through the Brewing Network, go to the site. There's a banner ad. Click on that, and then like half the subscription price goes to the BYO.
Yeah,
to the BN. Yeah. 50-50. So it's a good way to subscribe and support the BN at the same time. It's a great magazine. I did a Schwarzbier article in there, and I can't even remember what the numbers was. It was like an ounce in 5 gallons gives you like 5 SRM or something, or 6 SRM. I can post in the forum if somebody will remind me via email or something. But I worked it out, and I have the actual numbers. Or you might go to Environment site and you know,
yeah, they have a lot of information.
If you've got the ability to do math, and you know what, like, you know, if you can convert from,
so I could just ask you.
Liters, you can do it yourself, or you know, email me and I'll post it somewhere on the forum.
That'll be another app we can develop, Jamil.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I think this may be a question like how much lactic acid should I add to make a wit beer taste right. I think what I'm getting at is maybe experimentation.
Right. Just start adding it, and when it looks right, there you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was it from the chat today. But in reading their comments, AJ, you blew everybody away. This is a complex topic.
Fantastic.
Well, it is. It's kept me occupied in my retirement.
That's good. Keep you from going crazy, then.
It keeps my wife from going crazy.
Well, every deviant needs a hobby.
Yeah, This is true.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it's been my great pleasure. Yeah. Anytime.
Well, we'll be calling on you again. You do more than just color calculation, so we know we can leverage your brain power to make the show better. So we'll be doing that.
Hey, and AJ, I think it's really cool and speaks to your character that when you say the reason you got into color is because you're colorblind. It goes to tell what kind of guy he is. He wants to figure that stuff out that affects him, that bothers him. You know, I think that's a really cool place to start your studies.
Well, thanks. If it works for Dalton, it works for me.
That's right.
There you go. All right. Well, another fine show in the books, John.
Yeah.
And
some of the best.
I think we're bringing it strong with these fine guests. And if you like this sort of programming, make sure to support our sponsor, More Beer. Go to morebeer.com and check out all the goodies they have to offer. They got all sorts of things. And the
More Beer deal of the day.
More Beer deal of the day. That's a great thing, too. You can get stuff cheap and you can pick up a lot of good stuff from real good people there. They really do support the hobby. Fantastic. And another way to support us is to go to the Brewing Network store, pick up a shirt, a Brew Strong shirt. I love them. I wear them all the time.
Me too.
John wears them all the time. And pick up some books, glassware, whatever. It all goes to support the Brewing Network. And if you get a chance, you should go out and brew yourself a beer. Brew some beer for other people.
Yep.
And most importantly, brew strong.
Brew strong, everybody.